Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Kristen and I review books. So today I'm going to be talking about Mermaid by Carolyn Turgeon. So if you've never heard of that book before, don't feel bad because I found it on clearance in a secondhand bookstore. So you can already tell we're getting off to a pretty good start. So from what I could glean from the back of the book, it's a loose retelling of The Little Mermaid. I know it was like a classic fairy tale before that, but I know nothing about it, so we're just going off what I know. So in this book, we focus on two different princesses. One of them is a human who's been sent away to a nunnery to protect her, and the other princess is a mermaid who is about to be able to travel to the surface for the first time. So we're introduced to Margaret. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm just gonna say it like that. I don't really know.
Margrethe.
Shit. So she's the princess of the Northern Kingdom in this world. She's currently in disguise at a nunnery because of the rising tensions that are happening with the South. So she's neglecting her duties and she's looking over the sea at a cliff when she sees a mermaid drag a man's body onto the beach, and then the mermaid telepathically communicates with her and tells her to come help the man, and she does. So actually, every other chapter, we bounce back and forth between the two POVs. I think it's an annoying pattern, but that's what the writer decided to do. So now we're introduced to Lenia, who is a mermaid. It's her 18th birthday, and on their 18th birthday, mermaids get one chance to travel to the surface to see humans. She's unaccompanied. It's made to seem that humans are very dangerous, so of course, on their 18th birthday, they get to go alone to see humans. So when Lenia goes up, there's a big storm, and she watches a ship sink, and she sees a bunch of humans die. I should also mention that there's some lore about how humans have a soul and go to heaven when they die, and mermaids just kind of turn into sea foam. That sounds like it could be from the original fairy tale. Maybe I should have read that. But mermaids also live much longer than humans do, and it's implied that they never die from anything other than old age. I guess mermaids don't have any natural predators. I guess sharks don't care about them. So anyways, Lenia decides to save one of the drowning humans, and she brings him to shore. And as she's carrying this man to shore, she naturally decides that she's in love with this guy because he's a beefcake. He's the most handsome man she's ever seen. So once she gets this guy to the beach, she sees some girl on a cliffside and telepathically communicates with her. I think you get where this is going. It's Margaret. So back in Margaret's POV, she goes to get help, and then the man is brought to the infirmary, and she's so worked up. She gets so worked up that one of the other nuns has to drug her to get her to calm down and sleep. Girl, how horny are you? Well, I guess she's probably been in the nunnery for a while, and there's probably a real lack of men there. I don't know. I've never been a nun. So when she wakes up from being drugged, she immediately goes to visit him. She, stares at him while he's sleeping, and she admires his face and the shape of his lips, and she also notices that he's sparkly where the mermaid touched him, and no one else can see it. Only she can see it. And then he wakes up, and they banter for a bit, and she says that his eyes are the color of dying weeds, which, I love it. I love that. I love that for her. How flattering. But then she realizes he's from the South and she shouldn't be talking to him. Oh. So back to Lenia. For her birthday, her sisters give her a necklace that they found in the shipwreck. And then they mention, I don't really remember how it comes up, but they mention that there's a sea witch that makes potions. And that's it. That's all that happens in this chapter. Do you see how the back and forth kind of gets annoying? So Margaret ends up going to the nearby village with a couple of the higher up nuns, including the only nun that actually knows she's the princess. They go to see a couple of the king's men who are stationed in the village to ensure them of Margaret's safety. And then on the way back, they stop at a villager's house to drop off blankets and furs, because that's what nuns do. Charity. I think Margaret is the only person in this book that actually has any semblance of a character arc. She sees a family with like several sick and dying children, and she has a realization that though her father's war with the South is actually affecting a lot of people. Like, she sees how poor her kingdom has actually become while the king is focusing on this war. And she feels bad. So that's kind of sitting in the back of her mind as they get back to the nunnery. And as they get back, the man is actually getting ready to leave. But he wants to talk to Margaret before he leaves. He thanks her because he thinks it was her who saved him from drowning. And then they kiss. You know how you kiss someone you just met? I guess in his mind it's like a thank you kiss, but like, I don't know. I don't know why she kisses him back. She's horny. And then he leaves. Back with Lenia, she's swimming around the sunken ship, and she's pretending she's a human because she wants to be human. At least in The Little Mermaid, she collected all this human stuff, and she would like watch them all the time, but I don't understand Lenia's infatuation with humans at all. She hasn't seen them. Is it just like grass is always greener on the other side? She can't even fathom what the human world is like. I guess I understand a certain curiosity, but girl, you saw a man one time. Please calm down. Lenia actually ends up going back to the surface to meet Margaret on the beach, and they talk, and Lenia's like, I saved this man because I loved him. Okay, girly. And then Margaret just decides to explain what a convent is, and then Lenia touches Margaret's arm for some reason, and then she has to go pray, and the chapter ends. A lot of the chapters end really suddenly, it feels like. I feel like the writer was just like, yeah, that's it, that's good, we're done, cancel it. So Margaret is weaving with the other nuns when the king arrives. He actually came to bring Margaret back to the castle because he took this random man appearing at the nunnery as an attack from the south. But it turns out that the man was actually Prince Christopher of the Southern Kingdom. And he's pissed. And then Margaret is like, it was actually I saved him. Like, I found him on the beach. The king gets even more mad that she was allowed to wander without a guard, which I guess I understand. He intends on using this attack as means to start up the war again. And then they leave for the castle to like prepare for the war, and Margaret goes with him. So Lenia decides to go and see the sea witch to see if going on land is even possible for her. The witch tells her it is possible, but it will cost her her voice and she'll be in constant pain. Honestly, to give the witch some credit, she's like, you should just accept your own nature. So, and Lenia leaves to go think about it. Honestly, I think that makes Lenia's character motive even weaker, because rather than being tricked like in The Little Mermaid, literally the sea witch is telling you it's a bad idea, dude. Like, you're just stupid at that point. So Margaret arrives back at the castle, and she tells all of her handmaidens about how hot the enemy prince was. Then there's a feast in honor of her return, and the king tries to rally the troops to start the war again. But Margaret is worrying about how damaging the war will be to the people in her kingdom. She's really thinking about that dying child. It's in her mind's eye. She ends up talking to like her childhood tutor about it, and he tells her that she should try to like actually talk to her dad about it. So the next morning, she again tries to tell her dad that the prince wasn't there to harm her, and that the war is causing too much damage to the people, but he just blows her off. He doesn't care. We're never actually told why the king is so war hungry. It is mentioned at some point that like his wife died, but it had nothing to do with the South. I don't think he has any personal reason to want this war other than he likes war and he hates the South, which in terms of character motive is nothing. You got nothing. Like, how hard would it have been to be like, someone from the South snuck in and like killed his wife in the night? But it was literally just sickness, I think. Bad writing. Sorry, my camera died. And I realized, oh god. You see that? Does that look good? Okay, so we switch back to Lenia, who's moping and swimming around the palace, staring at her family like a freak. She sings for them at a feast, and then the next morning she goes back to the witch and asks her to perform the spell. She needed a night to decide that she wants to abandon her family. Girl, you're 18, so it only took her one night to decide that she wanted to abandon her family forever. So the sea witch tells her that she can take more time and that it's not a decision to take lightly, but Lenia decides to proceed anyway, despite saying that she has a feeling she should leave and never come back and just forget about the humans. Girl, everything is telling you not to do this. You don't have to you could come back at any point, but she's like, no, I'm gonna throw away my entire family who loves me for this one man who I've never even spoken to. Why would you? Who wrote this? So then she gets her tongue cut out for the spell, and she gets a potion to drink once she's at the beach, which I think has her tongue in it, which would already be like I can't do this. I'm just gonna go live without my tongue. Like, I can't drink that. Before she leaves, the sea witch tells her that in order to fully turn into a human with a soul, she needs to marry the prince. If someone else marries the prince, then the next morning she'll turn into sea foam, which is basically what happens when a mermaid dies. And if the prince never marries, then she'll just be soulless forever. Which I feel like what was gonna happen anyways if she stayed a mermaid, so I don't understand why that's such a big deal. So Lenia swims for like 2 days straight, no tongue, she's bleeding into her mouth, and then when she reaches the beach, she actually waits for it to be nighttime so no one will see her, which is like the first intelligent thing she's done the entire book. And then so once it's nighttime, she crawls onto the beach and drinks the potion, and she passes out because the pain is so intense. So back with the princess, the kingdom is assembling an army, and Margaret can't stop thinking about those sick children she saw in the village. I think that Margaret's story is really the only non-static character, and I wish that this writer had done more with it. She then immediately makes me retract my thoughts because she also can't stop thinking about Prince Christopher and his weed-colored eyes. How handsome is this man? So Margaret goes to talk to her mentor again, and she tells him about how a mermaid actually brought Christopher to the beach. Rather than thinking she's crazy, he actually believes her and tells her that he also saw a mermaid when he was young, and it was the most magical thing he ever experienced. So after that conversation, she decides to take the mermaid bringing Christopher to her as an act of God, and she believes that it's her duty to protect both of their kingdoms. And she's like, what if I married him? So they send a message to the south, hoping that the king and queen will just agree to an arranged marriage. And after that, she goes to her mom's room for some reason, and she looks around and is sad. Nothing happens. She just, yeah, my mom's dead. It doesn't advance the plot. It doesn't advance her character. She just wanted to be like, hey, her mom's dead. So be nice to her, okay? Back in Mermaid Town, Lenia wakes up on the beach and feels cold for the first time. I guess mermaids don't get cold. An old woman finds her and she sees her fancy necklace, so she assumes she must be a noble. A crowd gathers to help her, and someone is like, I've never seen a woman more beautiful. not the time or place, and you did it at my birthday dinner. So now when Lenia is walking, it feels like she's stepping on knives, but part of the spell is so that no one can tell. I guess, like, she just appears to be walking normally. I don't really know why that's important or how that works. The author was just like, yeah, it hurts when she walks, but by the way, no one else can tell, so it's not like she has to hide it or anything. It's just, she's a tortured soul. So they take her inside the castle because they think she's a noble. And the prince's sister, Katrina, is the first person to meet with her. And she immediately puts her in a room next to hers because she recognizes the necklace that Lenia is wearing, because it came from the ship that sank with Christopher on it, so it probably belonged to him or someone he knew. So they give her a bath and some clothes, and Katrina tries to set her up with Prince Christopher. So they go to the big lunch, and everyone stares at Lenia because she's so pretty. So she starts shoveling food into her mouth because there's no other way for her to eat without a tongue. So she's just horking down food, and then Prince Christopher enters the room, and they just start eye-fucking each other while everyone's watching. Christopher sits down next to his sister, and they're like, she can't talk, so let's just give her a name, like a fucking dog. Let's just name her. And so they decide to call her Astrid, and Lenea's just like, sure, I'll go along with it, because what is she gonna do? She can't talk. I don't think she can write. And then after dinner, Lenia and Christopher go for a walk. And he leads her to a tower, and they kiss, and then they start to undress each other, and then they have sex. She does consent through, like, enthusiasm, and she's very clearly into it, and she doesn't try to get him to stop, but something just, it feels a little weird. I don't know, like, she didn't try to get him to stop. It feels there's a weird power dynamic because he's the prince and she can't talk. It just feels weird. I didn't mention this, but the front of this book has a review that calls this book a sexy fairy tale. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a fanfic girly. I've been reading fanfic since I was probably 12. I'm 21 now, I'm still reading it. I'll probably be reading it on my deathbed. I'll be actively dying, surrounded by my family. And I'm just like, I gotta finish this 100,000 word, gentle beard, slow burn coffee shop AU before I die. I'm just saying, I've seen some pretty wild stuff. And when you call this a sexy fairy tale, I expect the most revolting, toe-curling smut on this earth. And then you just use flowery language to pussyfoot around the smut. I'm pissed. And it's not even like I expect books to have smut. Like, I'm not a middle-aged mom who needs every book to have, like, two people raw-dogging each other. Most of the books I read don't have smut in it. But when you explicitly go out of your way to say that this is a sexy fairy tale, and then you give me nothing, I'm gonna be mad. I gotta calm down. Back with Margaret, the South wrote back and they agreed to the arranged marriage. So now Margaret has to sneak out of the kingdom and make a trip south with 2 guards and her closest lady in waiting. The trip is, like, described, and there's, like, some weird tension between the lady in waiting and one of the guards, but none of it ever comes up again. It's not exciting, and nothing important happens. So we end up back with Lenia. She wakes up and has to get used to the pain that she now feels when walking. For some reason, there's, like, a sharp edge on the mirror in her room, and she just, like, cuts herself on it because we needed to move the plot along. So when Katrina comes to visit her, she's like, you're bleeding, and then she goes to get the healer woman. And after Lenia is all bandaged, Katrina reveals that she was trying to get her and Christopher to sleep together because Christopher hasn't been himself lately. That's a weird thing to do in the first place. Like, you were like, my brother's acting weird, he must need to fuck. That's your brother, dude. And maybe talk to him instead of trying to get him laid. Like, with a girl that can't talk, I feel like I would immediately be like, that's a little weird, maybe we should get to know her better before I try to get you two to fuck. Anyways, the next day, Christopher, Katrina, Lenia, and a bunch of other nobles all go on a hunt. And even though Lenia has never ridden a horse, she's really good at it. And she passes all the other women because she's just not like them, and everyone is really impressed and everyone claps. And then after the hunt, the prince brings her to a pond and they kiss, and he reveals that he doesn't even remember that it was her that saved him. I think he thinks it might have been Margaret because he saw her on the beach as she was helping him. I don't know. So Margaret and her handmaiden finally make it to the Southern Kingdom, and they just kind of gawk at all the people and the castle until some guards find them and are like, oh, you should, we'll show you to our room. What was their plan? If the guards didn't find them, were they just gonna stand there until someone found them? So after a couple hours, they have an audience with the king and the queen, and Margaret is disappointed when Prince Christopher isn't there because she just wanted to look at him. So the king actually reveals that the prince doesn't even know she's there or about the arranged marriage at all, and that he's not going to be happy that he's being forced into a marriage. And then back with Lenia, she's being fitted for a dress, and literally all she thinks about is the prince. He calls her to his room every night, and whenever she isn't with him, she's thinking about him. And I feel like the author thought this would be romantic, but it feels really obsessive and unhealthy, and I can't even pretend like this is romantic. It's creepy. And the prince claims to love her, but it feels like he's just using her because she literally can't talk. And I don't know how much you can know each other with a one-way relationship like that. So she actually throws up during the dress fitting, and you'll never guess she's pregnant! Because that's what makes a romance novel, is a pregnancy trope. But then that night, they have a fancy dinner, and the arranged marriage is actually announced, and Christopher gets all mad and storms out with Lenia. And later, Katrina walks in on Lenia crying, and she's like, why are you crying? You wouldn't have been able to marry him anyways. He's not able to choose his own wife, which seems unnecessarily brutal. But I already got bad vibes from Katrina, so I'm not shocked. Next chapter, Margaret realizes that Astrid looks very similar to Lenia, and then Margaret goes to talk to Christopher to try to win him over, but he's just pissed that she lied about being a nun. Even though it makes sense that she was in hiding, so I don't know why he's that upset. You also didn't tell her that you were the prince of the Southern Kingdom, so, she was in hiding. I don't get it. Nothing important happens in the next chapter because it's 2 pages long. It's literally just in here to keep the pattern of bouncing back and forth between the POVs, which, like I said, I don't think was necessary. I think you could have just had a chapter be in their POV when they had something important to talk about. So Margaret has a pity party because the prince doesn't want to marry her, and she's all like, is it because I'm not pretty enough? And maybe it's because you've never talked to her, but actually that's not an issue to him, so maybe not. Maybe you're just not pretty. So she ends up in a library and she's reading the Odyssey in Greek. And then the prince wanders in and he's like, wow, you can read Greek? And she's like, yeah, my mom insisted I learn it before she died. And he's like, he actually apologizes to her for being rude, and she apologizes for putting him into an awkward position, and they both admit that they thought the other was really attractive when they first met, and then he kisses her hand. Altogether, this scene is fine. Like, they actually both apologize for being kind of shitty to each other, and then they're like, wow. The next morning, Margaret goes to Christopher's room, but she sees Lenia leaving and decides to just go back to her own room. And she starts crying when the handmaiden asks her what's wrong, and she says that he seemed so different when I first met him. And I'm just like, I think you spoke 2 sentences to each other. So I have a hard time feeling bad for you. Anyways, her handmaiden chokes on some of the wine, and Margaret calls for a doctor, and it turns out that it was an assassination attempt. And this feels like the first exciting thing that's happened in this book, honestly. But then we go to the next chapter, and they've already found the culprits, and they're being hung. So why even bother putting that in there? It doesn't even add any length. It's like, I think it's genuinely 1 page. Did you just not know how to end the chapter? You were like, yeah, one of them gets poisoned. So anyways, the rest of this chapter is Lenia once again being jealous of Margaret, and Lenia is very far along in her pregnancy for how long it's been since she got pregnant. I think it's just written off as she's a mermaid. But in this world, mermaids don't give live birth. They lay eggs. So it doesn't even make sense in this world's lore. But the prince comes to visit her, and he admits that he has no choice but to go through with the arranged marriage. So the wedding is officially announced, and then Lenia tells the healer, the one that she could talk to telepathically, that she needs to have this baby before dawn breaks on the morning after the prince's wedding. So the healer just she finds her some herbs to induce labor. That, honestly, I can't even lie. I've used that before in a fan fiction. It was set before modern medicine, and I was like, how can I get the effect of this modern medicine in this pre-modern medicine time? And I was like, herbs! Herbs will solve everything. That's the moral of the story. The next chapter is, once again, only 3 pages. She was really running out of steam at the end. She was just cranking out 3-page chapters. Maybe write a better story, but... So Margaret goes for a walk on the beach, and she actually sees a mermaid in the water, and that's the thing that makes her realize that Astrid is Lenia. So she actually goes to find Lenia, and she finds her giving birth, and it's a whole thing. And Margaret comes in while Lenia is in the middle of giving birth, and she's like, oh my god, you're the mermaid. Like, girl, give her a minute, please. So the baby is born, and it's healthy, and it has white hair, and it's human. It doesn't look like a mermaid at all. I think it would have been cool if it was 3/4 human, and then 1/4 fish, and it just had flippers, but they decided not to do that. I should rewrite this book. I'm going to rewrite this book, not change anything. I'm just going to make it so this baby has flippers. The prince finally comes in. He missed the entire birth of his own child. And he's like, I want to name the baby Christina after my grandmother. And then because she literally can't talk, Lenia's like, yeah, sure. You named me. Why can't you name our baby? And then he leaves after 5 minutes. And Margaret actually starts crying and apologizes to Lenia because she's like, I thought that when you brought him to me, it was a sign and that I was supposed to marry him in order to save my kingdom. Lenia just kind of seems resigned at this point. I think she just wanted to have her baby. So Margaret promises her that she'll try to give her and her baby the best possible life while she's the queen, but Lenia just starts crying because she knows she's gonna die. So we jump straight into the wedding, and the priest says very specifically that they share the same soul and the same blood. But Margaret is sad, and she goes to check on Lenia, but Lenia's just gone. She goes looking for Lenia, and she finds her waiting on the beach, waiting to turn back into sea foam. Lenia's sisters are also there in the water, and they're bald. When I first read this scene, I don't know, I was so confused, and I started laughing because I was imagining them like, you know those foam mannequin like wig heads? I was imagining them as those, and I don't know why. Her sisters are there because they actually talked to the sea witch, and she took their hair in exchange for a counterspell. They hand Lenia a knife, and they tell her that she just needs to spill some of Christopher's blood on her legs, and they'll turn back into a tail. But of course, Lenia refuses. But Margaret has an idea. So she grabs the knife, and she stabs herself in the thigh, bleeding all over Lenia's legs. They turn back into a tail, and then she swims away, leaving her daughter to be raised by Margaret and Christopher. So I have several problems with this ending. The reason as to why Margaret's blood worked in place of Christopher's is that they were married. Like, his blood became her blood. Why does this magical spell have a legal loophole? I also just think it would have been a better ending if Lenia did end up dying, satisfied that she was able to live her dream. Or it could have been good if Lenia did end up killing Christopher, trading the entire peace treaty for her own happiness. But, like, she's forever haunted because she had to leave her daughter in a broken kingdom. I think that could have been a good resolution. But no one likes my ideas. Nothing really happens after that. People eventually think that Christina is Margaret's daughter, despite the fact that she looks nothing like her. And also the fact that Christina's skin is sparkly. Overall, I thought this was a bad book. There was no interesting plot, very little character development, and quite frankly, I don't think it was worth the $6 I paid for it. I wouldn't recommend reading it, but I do hope that you enjoyed me dogging on this book. If you liked this video, leave a like, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.